Shabbat Shalom. We have come to chapter 21, the final chapter in our study of the Gospel of John. We are studying the Gospel of John with particular interest in the question, who is Yeshua? And more specifically, how it pertains to the doctrines of the Trinity and the deity of Christ. And if it's true that the Gospel of John is full of proof for the deity of Christ. So we've at the final chapter. I can say with absolute confidence, if you go through all the other teachings on the study of the Gospel of John, that not only is the so-called proof insufficient, I would say that the alternative explanations, the alternative interpretations for what would be regarded as proof texts for the Trinity or the deity of Christ, the alternative explanations are much better, more biblically defensible than the idea that Jesus is God. So, coming to chapter 21, remember, as always, press pause, read the chapter a couple of times through. We're doing a big picture overview, so we're not going verse by verse in detail. We're looking at each chapter from a big picture point of view. Read the chapter a number of times through, and then you'll be very familiar with it as we go through. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to refer to certain verses. So press pause. Done that, and so we're ready to continue. Okay, so the first issue pertaining to who is Yeshua, who he is, and who the disciples think he is, and is the word Lord. And so we have the narrative of Yeshua has now risen from the dead, and he meets the disciples on the beach, and he makes breakfast for them. And they're out in the boat, and they see him on the beach. They don't know who it is. Then John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, verse 7, that we believe to be the Apostle John. And so he says, it's the Lord. Now, in the previous chapter, we briefly looked at the word Lord, because Thomas said, my Lord. And so we saw, and we have seen previously, that the word Lord is the word for the title for someone to whom you owe obedience. And so it is your master. So the word Lord is the title for a person who is your master, the one to whom you owe obedience. And so it's a respectful title. It's a recognition of his superiority and his lordship. The fact that they do owe him as we all do, owe him our obedience. And so he is the Lord. It's not a title for God. Sometimes it is used with reference to God. So God is also our Lord, because he is also someone to whom we owe our obedience. So we can have many lords. Doesn't mean they're all the same person. And so Yeshua is indeed Lord. The fact that they use that title amongst themselves and to him in their day. So before Pentecost, this is before the Spirit has been poured out, and before they have their eyes have been opened, and they have this revelation, which will lead them to accepting persecution and death in the name of Yeshua for the glory of God, the Father. So this is before that. This is still when they were still unsure, when they were still a little bit dom. That's a South African expression. That means a little bit naive, a little bit in the dark, a little bit ignorant. You would remember from the previous chapter when Mary tells them that Yeshua has risen. They still didn't understand. Even though Yeshua had explained to them that he would rise, They still didn't understand. So they're still dumb, okay? They still haven't got it yet. They get it at Pentecost because it's the Spirit that then reveals to them, as Yeshua had said to them, the Spirit will remind you of all the things that he had spoken. So the Spirit is the one that reveals to them, and then their eyes are open and they really understand all the things that he had said to them. Now they finally get it. So now, so pre-Pentecost, at this time, to call him Lord, if they meant Lord as in God, they would be guilty of blasphemy, and it would be justifiable according to Mosaic law, not the Pharisees' corruption of the law, but Dinkum Mosaic law. It would be justifiable for them to be stoned to death because that would be blasphemy to call a man God. And so the fact that they used the title Lord pre-Pentecost, we can be fairly sure that they didn't mean Lord as in God. They use it in the context, in the correct context, what the word means, that it is the Lord, it is our master. John says to the others, it's our master. And when Simon hears this, he, in usual fashion, grabs his clothes and he jumps in the water, and everyone else is kind of more respectable and gets there in due time in the boat. Peter jumps in the water and swims there. And then they refer to him as Lord in verse 15. Yes, Lord, he said to him, you know that I love you. That's Peter. So then we go on to the this reinstating of Peter. And this is a beautiful story, but I'm not going to, this is not the focus of the study of John at the moment, so I'm not going to go into it now. Just briefly to say that he reinstates Peter, not like we would today, not saying to Peter, "Ach, it's okay, my boy, you messed up and it's fine. I forgive you and it's all good and we can continue." He actually rubs the salt in the wound deeper. This whole three-part question and answer is kind of like the 3 times Peter denies him. So he asks him 3 times if he loves him more than these. It could mean more than these, indicating those present. So the other disciples, do you love me more than the other disciples? Do you love me more than other people? Do you love me more than humanity in general? Whatever his more than these meant, most likely the other disciples that were there. And so Peter says to him, yes. So twice he asks him, the Greek word is phileo, which means brotherly love. Okay. The word for sacrificial love is agape. So there are actually 4 different Greek words for love. The 2 that are used here is phileo, brotherly love, and agape, which is sacrificial love. That's God's love. That's the kind of love that Yeshua had when he sacrificed himself. He gave himself up for humanity, for the sins of the world. And so that is sacrificial love. It's self-sacrificial love. So he's asking Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me to the extent that you will lay down your life for me? Now he's already proved that he doesn't, because he had the opportunity to do that and he failed. He denied him. And so the going back to fishing was kind of like well, I've messed up and I don't know what to do now, and Yeshua's gone and we don't know, and so we just go back to what we know. We go back to fishing. And so Yeshua comes and he asks him, and he says, essentially he's saying, no, I don't agapeo you, but I do agape you, but I do phileo you. So yes, I love you, phileo. Yeshua asked, do you agape me? Peter responds, yes, I phileo you. He asked him that twice. The third time, the reason Peter's upset that he asked him a third time is not because he asked him a third time. It could be because he asked him a third time, because it echoes the 3 denials. But the third time he asks him, he uses the word phileo. And so he's saying essentially, you say you don't agape me, but you do phileo me. Now I'm asking you, do you even phileo me? Do you love me as much as you even think you love me? And then Peter says, Lord, you know everything. And so this is the verse I want to focus on, because it's kind of an admission by Peter that, yes, I do. He goes on to say, you know that I love you. So he does love him, even though he fell, even though he was weak, even though he failed. He still does love him. But he probably at this point, he doesn't really know how to express it or what kind of love, because Yeshua is pointing out, and this is why I say it's kind of like rubbing the salt in deeper. He restores him, but he restores him without kind of soft soaping or mamby-pambying the failure that Peter had. He restores him by driving him even further down, by humiliating him even further, so that Peter can really get the revelation that things are not always what they seem, and even our own feelings, even when we swear blind that we are going to do X, Y, or Z, or we will never do X, Y, or Z, or whatever the case may be, even then we cannot trust ourselves. We cannot trust our own hearts. The prophet Jeremiah said our hearts are deceitful above all things. And so he drives him to the point where he really, really comes to the point where he really has to stand on faith, stand on the power of God, and not himself, and not his own feelings or his own intentions or his own belief of what he might or might not do. And so he affirms, he says, Lord, you know everything. And so in that moment, he's saying, well, actually, I don't really know, but you know. And then this is the verse that many will take, add to other verses, which reveal some of what would be the attributes of God. So characteristics that God has. So that the technical theological term is omniscience, all-knowing, to know everything. Peter says, you know everything. So many people would take that to add to their list of divine attributes that Yeshua displays, and would say, well, there you go, that confirms that Jesus must be God, because only God is all-knowing, only God is omniscient, and so therefore he must be God, because Peter affirms that he knows everything. He's omniscient. Well, again, when it comes to the attributes of God, the power of God, these are all things which Yeshua has over and over emphasized, explicitly stated, have been given to him by God. So these are things that if something is given to you, it means that you didn't have it before. Now it's been given to you. Now you have it. These things were given to Yeshua by God. If we go back to chapter 3, John chapter 3, verse 34 to 55, right from the beginning, Yeshua starts to affirm that he was given things by God. Chapter 3, verses 34 to 35. Chapter 3, I'm looking at chapter 2. The one whom God has sent speaks the words of God. For God gives the Ruach, the Spirit, without limit. The Father loves the Son and has given everything into his hand. So there, right from chapter 3, we get one of the first expressions by Yeshua that these things have been given to him by the Father, by God. In chapter 5, verses 19 to 22, therefore Yeshua answered them, Amen, amen, I tell you, the Son cannot do anything by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he does. He will show him even greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. For just as the Father raised the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wants. The Father does not judge anyone, but has handed over all judgment to the Son, so that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. So these things have been given to Yeshua by God. So it's no surprise or mystery that Yeshua should have divine attributes, because God gave him divine attributes. If he was God, there would be no need for God, it's already getting confusing, to give them to him, because he is God. He has them. God doesn't receive anything. What he has, he's always had. There's nothing that he needs and nothing that he receives, for there's nothing external to God. He's the creator of all things and the origin of all things. And so everything, God doesn't get anything from anyone. John chapter 14, verse 10. Don't you believe that I'm in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father dwelling in me does his works. And so we have a deeper view of what it means for God to have given Yeshua certain attributes. Not only is he able to do what he does because God has given it to him, but God himself works through him, just as we do when we have the Holy Spirit in us, and we can do things that are supernatural, that are out of it's not our own power that we do these things. It's because of God working through us by his Spirit. Acts chapter 2, verse 22. This is now after Pentecost. So now we go to post-Pentecost to see what do the disciples teach after they've received the Spirit, after they have been reminded and had this revelation. So now they understand all the things that Yeshua had spoken to them. If he had meant, and they missed it when he was still alive, when he was still on earth, if he had meant to say that he is God, and he was trying desperately to teach them that he is God, or that he is part of God, or that he is some form of relationship, divine relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit, some Trinity type arrangement, if that was what was meant, then surely after they'd received the Spirit, they would begin to teach such things. We don't see that. We see the opposite. We see what we've just heard from Yeshua himself. Acts chapter 2, verse 22. Men of Israel, hear these words. Yeshua HaNatzrati. That's a reference to his human nature. He's Yeshua from Nazareth. HaNatzrati, the Nazarene. A man authenticated to you by God. Not the Father, but God. With mighty deeds and wonders and signs God performed through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. And so we see that, and there are many, many others I could go on, but for time, we'll just keep it with Acts chapter 2. So we see that Yeshua himself, that the disciples after Pentecost affirm that these abilities that Yeshua had, these divine attributes, as it were, are given to him by God. He has that power because God gave it to him, just as we have that power because God has given it to us through his Spirit, by his Spirit. Yeshua said, we read it, that God gives the Spirit without measure. So God gave Yeshua his Spirit, which enabled him to do what he did. And when after Pentecost, he poured out his Spirit on all believers. And so we are able to do things beyond human power, which is the power of God. It's not us. So Yeshua then goes on, and in closing, he makes a prophecy. So he affirms Peter, and then he gives Peter the reassurance by telling him really how he will die. And this is reassurance because now Peter, um, uh, full of remorse over denying Yeshua, having wasted the opportunity to glorify God through his own death or persecution, or by just standing up for Yeshua or doing something, at least not denying him, he now gives him the reassurance that he will again have the opportunity to glorify God, that he will die. When he's old, when you were young, you did what you wanted, went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. And so tradition tells us that Peter was indeed crucified like Yeshua, though he opted to be crucified upside down because he didn't deem it worthy to be crucified the same way as Yeshua was crucified. That's church tradition. But certainly here, Yeshua is inferring that he will be crucified. He stretched out his hands like Yeshua's hands were stretched out on the cross. And so in verse 19, John reveals, now this he said to indicate by what kind of death Peter was going to glorify God. And so I believe part of what John is revealing is the fact that part of the divine attributes, again, if you like, is Yeshua's kind of affirming what Peter just said about you know everything. And then he goes on to give a prophecy about how Peter will die. And that is explained again in Acts after Pentecost. In Acts chapter 3, Peter himself reveals what Moses said, and he is speaking of Yeshua and how Yeshua had been prophesied in the scriptures, and he says in verse 22, chapter 3, verse 22, Moshe said to Yahuwah, your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me. That's Moshe speaking now, Moses. Moses said, Yahuwah your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brothers. And so Moses was a prophet. He was a leader. This is what we see in the Messiah, the prophecies of the Messiah. He will be a leader and priest and leader, prophet and leader. And he goes on to say, hear and obey him in all that he shall say to you. So not only is Moses saying, like me, in other words, a leader, prophet, leader, I'm a man. He affirms that or kind of emphasizes that by saying, from among your brothers, which again puts Yeshua on a level with humanity, with men, with human beings, not on a level with God. He's like me, Moses, I'm a man, and he will raise him up from among your brothers, putting him on a level with God. I mean, with men, with human beings. And then he, again in Acts chapter 7, he reaffirms that, in case anyone missed it the first time, he reaffirms in verse 37, this is the Moses who said to the sons of Israel, God will raise up for you a prophet like me. And so twice in the book of Acts, Moses is used as the example of who Yeshua is, a prophet like Moses. So they are teaching that Yeshua is the Messiah. And the Messiah is who Moses said would be a prophet like himself. And so twice they affirm that. In the book of Hebrews, Hebrews 3 verse 3, the writer to the Hebrews takes us even further. I'm going to go from verse 1. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters, partners in the heavenly calling, take notice of Yeshua, the emissary and Kohen Gadol, that's high priest. We affirm he was faithful to the one who appointed him in his house, as was Moses also. For he has been considered worthy of more glory than Moses, even as the builder of the house has more honor than the house. For every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. Now Moses surely was faithful in all God's house as a servant, for a witness of things to be spoken later, but Messiah as son is over God's house. So here the writer to the Hebrews is taking the understanding of a prophet like Moses even further and saying, yes, prophet like Moses, but greater than Moses, of more honor than Moses. And so if the writer to the Hebrews, certainly many people use the book of Hebrews as proof for the deity of Christ, if the writer of the book of Hebrews was attempting to prove the deity of Christ, would he be trying to get his listeners to understand that the Messiah is of greater honor than Moses? If he's God, then there's no question that he's of greater honor than Moses. So in all of the book, then it closes with that passage 23. There are also many other things that Yeshua did. If all of them were to be written one by one, I suppose that not even the world itself will have room for the books that have been written. And so we've seen that the Apostle John has recorded all things necessary to understand who Yeshua is, all things necessary for salvation. And going back to chapter 20, verse 30, what was the final conclusion, John's final conclusion of what is to be believed? Yeshua performed many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these things have been written so that you may believe that Yeshua is Messiah ben Elohim, that is Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. After Pentecost, that's chapter 20, verse 30, after Pentecost, after they've received the Spirit, after they now understand things more fully, do they teach anything different? Acts chapter 2, verse 36, it says, therefore, so you must read before 36 because the therefore is always there for a reason. And so they have been describing who Yeshua is, the Messiah. Yeshua is the Messiah, and God has raised him up, and God is the one that appointed him. And verse 33 says, therefore, being exalted to the right hand of God and receiving from the Father the promise of the Ruach HaKodesh, he poured out. And then verse 36, therefore, let the whole house of Israel know for certain that God has made him, this Yeshua, whom you have crucified, both Lord and Messiah. This is exactly what John affirmed. This is what the disciples teach, that Yeshua is Lord, Master, the one to be obeyed, and Messiah, the anointed of God, the one prophesied in the Old Testament, anointed by God. This is the same thing that the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 9 verse 10 affirms, 10 verse 9, for if you confess with your mouth that Yeshua is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead? God raised him from the dead. You will be saved. This is what is necessary for salvation. Not that you believe that Yeshua is God, but that you submit to him as Lord, that is Master, that is the one you need to obey, and you believe that he was raised from the dead, and you believe that he is the anointed one of God, the Messiah, the anointed of God, and then you will be saved. So, closing the book of John, the Gospel of John, certainly in my studies, and hopefully at the very least, it has been food for thought to reevaluate the doctrines that we have been taught over and over again by the church, and certainly those doctrines that the church teaches are essential for salvation. and see if these things be so, like the Bereans. I certainly, in all my research, have come to the conclusion that these things are not quite as we have been taught and as the church emphasizes. And it is a major, major obstacle to the salvation for the Jews. And so it is no surprise that this should have happened. So I pray it's been a blessing, and I wish you a blessed Shabbat. Well, the Shabbat in our part of the world has come to a close, and tomorrow begins Hashoah, the day of disaster. It's the International Holocaust Memorial Day. So have blessed Hashoah.